Good morning, everyone. First off, it was great seeing all of you and meeting many of you for the first time when I was back in D.C. with the Iraqi delegation a couple weeks ago. So let's go ahead and get started. We'll begin in Syria, and then we'll move to Iraq. Today marks day 53 of operations to defeat ISIS in Raqqa. About 45% of the city is under control of the Syrian Democratic Forces. The SDF have cleared about 9 square miles of terrain this past week as they fought against stiff, sporadic resistance from ISIS entrenched in the city. On the western axis, the SDF took control of a series of multi-story buildings that allowed them to provide overwatch and push further into the city center. On the eastern axis, the SDF made incremental gains south of the main road that runs east to west in the city. Currently, the distance between the east and west SDF axes is less than a half a mile. And once they link up, the SDF will have full control of southern Raqqa. And south of the Euphrates River, the SDF continue to isolate Raqqa and reinforce their positions. In southern Syria, the al-Karyateyn, commonly referred to as the Shuk, one of our partner forces there, unilaterally, without U.S. or coalition permission or coordination, conducted patrols outside of the agreed-upon de-escalation zone and engaged in activities not focused on fighting ISIS. The coalition only supports partner forces committed to fighting ISIS. The Shuk have been important partners in the fight against ISIS in southern Syria. However, the coalition will no longer support their operations. The coalition will support and train and advise and assist and accompany vetted partner forces in southern Syria that wish to defeat ISIS. Moving to Iraq, the Iraqi security forces control all parts of Mosul and continue to conduct detailed clearance operations to look for any ISIS fighters in hiding and identify explosive devices that could threaten friendly forces or civilians. Iraqi Army, Emergency Response Division, Counterterrorism Service, and federal police forces maintain their sectors of Mosul until the hold forces take over and secure the area. There have been no strikes by the coalition in Mosul for nearly 2 weeks now. There have only been a handful of direct fire engagements by the ISF in Mosul over the last week. And for the first time since operations to liberate Mosul began in October 2016, Tuesday marked the first day there were no ISF casualties in Mosul. These are all indicators to the improving security situation there. There have been consistent reporting of alleged law of armed conflict violations recently. The coalition does not condone any violation of the laws of armed conflict, and while we cannot verify the authenticity of the reports, any violation of the law of armed conflict is unacceptable and should be investigated in a transparent manner. We meet routinely with our partner forces to advise them on the expectations for thorough and transparent investigations, accountability for anyone found responsible for abuses, and public disclosure of findings and actions taken. The coalition has gathered alleged LOAC violations from various sources, from traditional and social media to from international organization reports and reports from coalition members. We pass all allegations of abuse that come to our attention to the government of Iraq. Prime Minister Abadi has stated that everyone will abide by the law, that he has a zero-tolerance policy for any improper action by the Iraqi security forces. The government of Iraq has investigated previous allegations, and they have taken action. And we have encouraged them to present the facts of these investigations to the public. Lastly, I would like to discuss how the Combined Joint Task Force and the greater coalition are countering ISIS propaganda efforts. We have said several times that we will not allow ISIS sanctuary. When known, we will degrade ISIS' ability to conduct battlefield operations, to inspire, plan, finance, and direct terror attacks, and recruit and move terrorist fighters. In recent months, the coalition has targeted and killed several senior ISIS propagandists and facilitators in Iraq and Syria. The removal of these key ISIS leaders disrupts ISIS propaganda production, distribution, and the ability to fund their activities. Abu Sulaiman al-Iraqi, a senior ISIS propaganda official, was killed by a coalition airstrike near Mosul in early July. Al-Iraqi provided strategic guidance and production oversight for ISIS propaganda, which recruited, indoctrinated, and directed terrorists around the world. Ibrahim al-Ansari, an ISIS propaganda official, was killed on March 25th in Al-Qaim, Iraq. Abu Ali al-Janubi, an ISIS senior media director, was killed April 16th in Mayadeen, Syria. Abu Sayyaf al-Azawi, an ISIS media emir, was killed April 27th in Al-Qaim, Iraq. Abu Khattab al-Rawi, an ISIS media emir, was killed May 17th in Baj, Iraq. And Ryan Mashal, ISIS senior media official, was killed by the coalition airstrike conducted near Mayadeen, Syria between May 25th and May 27th. Meshal was the head and founder of Amaq, ISIS's official propaganda media outlet. He oversaw, authorized, and disseminated ISIS digital propaganda to instigate and direct terror and recruit foreign terrorist fighters. And lastly, Bassam al-Jaifus, who handled ISIS funds for terror attacks, was killed by a coalition airstrike on July 18th in Mayadeen, Syria. His death disrupts ISIS' multinational money laundering and movement network, which is used to pay for foreign terrorist fighters as well as plotting attacks throughout the world. While the CJTF, the coalition, the military component, conducts these operations, the greater coalition of 73 international partners have collectively blunted the edge of terrorist propaganda. ISIS online supporters are dwindling, with counter-ISIS content outnumbering pro-ISIS content across the world. In May, there was a 92% decrease in global shares of ISIS video content on Twitter. In April, ISIS propaganda production dropped to its lowest point in over 6 months, a 75% reduction in ISIS monthly output in 2016. And the global coalition launched a new campaign called #TakeDash-Down to inform social media users of how to report ISIS extremist content to platform owners, and adding pressure on these owners to act and remove its content. ISIS is losing on every front, on the battlefield, in recruiting, and social media, and generating money. And they will continue to lose with the pressure put on by our partners in Iraq and Syria. And just to let you know, with all the names that I just provided on those propagandists that we killed after the conclusion of this briefing, that will be a press release by CJTF-OIR with all those names, so you don't have to worry about writing them down.
See that ISIS shoot down some one RQ-20 drone of SDF, allegedly. Are you aware that the SDF has those drones, or do you know, or did you provide to them? Can you tackle this question?
I have not seen or heard of that report that you were referring to. I know that we do use unmanned aerial surveillance devices to provide intelligence and what is going on with ISIS activity in Iraq and Syria. I am not tracking the particular instance that you are talking about, but I will also say that there are measures, countermeasures for UAS devices that are in areas throughout Iraq and Syria where we are providing support to our partner forces.
SDF have drones or unmanned aircrafts, do you know?
I do not know what kind that they have. We know that it is relatively easy to get drones and to use them throughout the battlefield. We've seen that both from the enemy and from partner forces. But bottom line is, I don't know what type and what kind they use.
I have a couple questions. Earlier in your prepared remarks, you said that the coalition will no longer support operations of a specific group in southern Syria. Could you elaborate on that a little bit? Oh, there you go. What was the group? What were the violations? What led to this decision?
First, I won't try to spell the name of the group, but is commonly known as the Shuk. And they are one of the partner forces that we were working with in and out of the Al-Tanf area in southern Syria. We have made it very clear time and again that our goal in Syria and in Iraq is to fight ISIS and fight ISIS only. And our partner forces, we've asked them to be committed to that same mission. And we had an element, a partner force that we were working with, who wanted to pursue other objectives. And those objectives were not consistent with defeating ISIS. So we have since talked with them and made them known that we cannot support them if they want to pursue objectives other than defeating ISIS. And so that's exactly what we've done, and we are no longer going to support this particular group because that is what they want to do.
Sure. A couple additional questions on that. The background of the group, any sort of descriptors, like Kurdish fighters, the size of the group, how long had the U.S. been partnering with this particular group, and then were they targeting regime forces? Is that why there was a break in that relationship?
All right, so on a couple of those questions, they are native from the area in and around southern Syria, around the Hamad Desert area. I'm not going to give the number of the element, nor the number of, well, I won't give the number of how many there are. What I will also say is that that group I'll just say that they pursued other objectives that were not consistent with fighting ISIS, and fighting the regime could be one of those objectives.
Can you provide their background at all?
No, they were not a Kurdish group. They were from the area in and around the Hamad Desert area, not far from the Al-Tanf garrison.
Are you aware of any instances in which American transgender service members have ever impacted battlefield readiness or the lethality of the force?
Yeah, I don't know that, and anything that has to do with the transgender piece, I'll refer you back to the Pentagon for anything to address on that.
Colonel Dillon, I want to go back to what you call the Shuk, the group Shuhada al-Karyateyn. Could you confirm if the coalition has warned the Shuk before they have conducted their attack on the Syrian regime? Was there any warning?
Our partner forces, so warning, I will say that our partner forces know and made a commitment to fight ISIS, and they are partnered with us as a part of the 1209 program to do just that. So they knew prior to going out and pursuing these other objectives what the repercussions could have been.
Could you confirm if the Shuk still or left at Tanf area, because they used to be part of the partner forces in the Tanf area? Are they still there or they have left?
No, they are still there. We're in the process of ceasing our support and receiving the equipment that we provided to them for the fight against ISIS.
Will you be asking them to leave?
I don't want to get into too many details. Again, we're still not working with them, but we're in the process of ceasing our support, and what happens after that is something that I'm not ready to discuss right now.
Yes, sir.
I had a question on Mosul. You mentioned it's the first day that an Iraqi security force member had not suffered a casualty. Has the U.S. begun shifting its advisory, or the coalition begun shifting its advisory presence out of Mosul? I know there's a lot of back-clearing work to be done. Have they started drawing down on the number of advisors in the area to reposition them elsewhere, or are you kind of maintaining the same level of advisory effort that had been going on during the actual battle?
On that particular question, I don't know, if we have began, transitioning yet. I know from reading the transcript and listening to Colonel Work last week is that one of the things that we do not want to do is have the Iraqi security forces have to wait on us. So as they develop their plan and their for the operations on where to go next, and when they make that transition, we will be ready to be right there to advise them all along.
Great. And just a quick one on the Antonov situation. We talked about this, I think, when you were here. I guess, can you help? There doesn't seem to be a lot of fighting, actually, that those groups at Antonov are doing against ISIS. Has there been any major engagements or any engagements at all between the groups we're backing in that area with ISIS fighters, or is the regime still kind of positions itself between those groups and ISIS? Are they kind of still blocking that access to ISIS territory?
There have been ISIS incursions, both in and around that area within this since January, within the last few months. Excuse me. And also, we know that the regime has also run into ISIS fighters where they are operating. So there still is ISIS presence in that area in southern Syria, moving towards Abu Kamal area.
First, you mentioned the 75% reduction in propaganda over the last 6 months out of ISIS. Can you give us a sense as to what the metric is that's being used to measure that drop? Is that just, social media? Is it in terms of the number of personnel they have working in media? What's the measurement?
With those figures that I presented, I talked much about the military efforts and killing many of the propagandists. I will follow up with you after this on the background of how the greater coalition, who was working out of London, came to that information. I'm about one layer deep on what I presented to you, but that is the greater coalition. I can point you in the right direction. I will link up with you after this and make sure you have a good contact.
Thank you. And the second thing, I know you said that you're not going to address the transgender policy issue that came out yesterday, but do you have a sense or a number as to how many trans service members there currently are participating in OIR? And can you give us any detail? Have they been told anything about policy issues yesterday? Not the policy itself, but have they been informed about anything related to the policy?
Number one, I don't know how many, and I don't know if they have been told.
To confirm on Atomf and the situation with the Shuk, can you confirm that some of those are part of the VSO, or that all of those are part of the VSO, the Vetted Syrian Opposition, and I believe some of those trained in Jordan, correct?
They are part of the Vetted Syrian Opposition. This was one of those groups that fell underneath that. And I don't know the answer to your second question about where they were trained. They were a partner force of ours, and we can no longer support them because they don't want to fight ISIS.
And one quick follow, a separate question. Some of those forces in Atomf, as has been explained to me, some of them are from the Abu Kamal Mayadeen area. Is there any plan in place to get them to where they can defend their homeland? Because right now, as Ryan was explaining, the Syrian troops are kind of in between you guys and that area.
You're absolutely right, and some of those vetted Syrian opposition forces that we still train are indigenous to areas along the middle Euphrates River Valley. And can we leave on trucks and go straight across to Abu Kamal and Mayadeen and Deir ez-Zor without running into the regime? Likely not. But as far as any future plans on getting them into the fight, we will address that, and we believe that there will be an opportunity to use them in the fight against ISIS in the Middle Euphrates River Valley when needed.
You mentioned retrieving the equipment that had been provided. Can you give us a little bit on what kind of equipment that is, and are you confident that this group who wants to conduct independent operations is going to willingly give up the weapons it has?
Those discussions with the Shuk leadership and our forces there are still going on. I'm not going to be able to tell you, by serial number, or even if we were going to, not even if, but the types of weapons and equipment that we are going to receive back from them. Meaning, is there going to be small arms? Is there going to be all the vehicles? Is there going to be all their uniforms? I don't know that answer for you right now, but we are going to retrieve some of the equipment that we provided them to fight ISIS.
Back to the U.S. forces inside Syria. We know that when the deployment happened, among the forces deployed to Syria, there were engineering folks as well. So can you say that the SDF forces are embedded, or these engineering folks are embedded within these SDF elements, and what kind of engineering things do they train the SDF forces with?
I can tell you, I know that there are counter IED training that we are providing and making sure that our partner force in Raqqa can face some of these threats that they are facing right now. There have been several IEDs, and that was well known. So I don't know specifically which unit you are talking about. I know that we have our advisors that are with the Syrian Democratic Forces, advising, assisting, and accompanying. But I won't get down into, are they engineers, are they JTACs, are they whoever they are. We're not going to talk about specifically who is embedded with them, but we are making sure that they are ready to face and mitigate the threats that they face. IED is one of those.
Colonel, what can you tell us about the Raqqa fight compared to the Mosul fight? How is it different? What are the challenges in Raqqa? Is it going easier than the Mosul fight? Thank you.
I think that it's fair to say that the fight in Raqqa is more similar to the fight in East Mosul than in West Mosul. The infrastructure and the spacing of the buildings, you don't have quite the congested and very tight confines of the old city of West Mosul like you do in Raqqa, at least not at that magnitude. Obviously Raqqa is much smaller than Mosul as well. But there still are a lot of those challenges that the Iraqi security forces faced in Mosul with the vehicle-borne IEDs, with the use of the human element and the population to shield, and that the ISIS is using, that we saw in Mosul, that we are seeing in Raqqa. So I would also take account how quickly that the Syrian Democratic Forces were able to make immediately into the city, but there have been some stiff resistance since making it to like the ancient wall area, and as we've gotten closer into the city center. I hope that answers your question.
It does. And how many ISIS fighters remain inside Raqqa right now?
We estimate less than 2,000 ISIS fighters still remain in Raqqa.
And finally, whose idea was it to add the word democratic to Syrian Democratic Forces?
I don't know. You would have to ask them, Lucas.
Google, Yahoo, Facebook, are they helping in this counter-ISIS narrative? And are they part of the team that helped get this 75% reduction in ISIS propaganda in the last 6 months, or any other help from the tech sector? Thanks.
Yeah, I know that I personally have read open accounts of several platforms that are working to remove extremist content from their sites. But as far as the specifics, I can't say every single one that has or has not. But like I told Zach, I'll be happy to refer you to our Global Coalition team up in London to delve into that answer for you a little bit more.
How concerned are you that that these groups are going to start going underground and be harder to track using other types of apps and communications for their propaganda?
If you can just elaborate on that a little bit more, what do you mean by going underground?
I guess as the more public platforms are shut down, as you were saying, using more secure ways of distributing their propaganda, is that a larger concern? And do you guys have sort of a plan to deal with those issues?
As far as whether or not they're going to go further underground, I can just tell you that if we are able to reduce their ability to inspire and to recruit other people who want to join their ranks, then that is success. If they go to underground, that means that there are fewer people that they can reach. But as far as the specifics to that and how to address it, I would again, like the others, refer you to our colleagues up in London who are really taking that global threat of ISIS propaganda and are weaving it throughout the entire world to defeat ISIS propaganda efforts.
Yes, sir. Oh, I just had one more, and I apologize. I know you said you really were referring the transgender issue to back here. On the ground, though, in a general sense, do you guys have a message for folks who might be surveying on the ground, who might be affected by this? Have you put a message out to the troops who are serving and might be concerned about this to, I guess, assuage any concerns that they may have?
We have not put anything out. We're going to await direction from the Pentagon on steps to move forward.
Great. Thank you, sir.
I wanted to follow up about this idea of the police in the box and border guards in the box that you had addressed several weeks ago. I think there were 100 that had been purchased and 50 had started going out. Can you tell us a little bit about the effectiveness of those? Have they been successful in encountering any skirmishes that could have come up? And what's your assessment of will more be purchased? Anything else you can tell us about that?
I don't have an answer for you right now. I will have to follow up with you on that afterwards, though.
Do you have an estimate of the overall ISIS fighters that are in Iraq and Syria now? Because we haven't got an update in a while.
You're going to make me do public math here, which I don't really like to do. But I'll break it down for you this way. I'll say that there are 5,000 to 10,000 ISIS fighters that we assess or that we estimate are in the middle Euphrates River Valley area. I already told you Raqqa, less than 2,000. And I think that, and then in Al-Qaim, we estimate about 1,000. I don't know if that answers your question. Those are the main ones that I'm tracking right now.
What about Talafar?
And in Talafar, less than 1,000.
Last week there was an expression of discontent by the Pentagon on a report by Anadolu Agency showing the U.S. bases in Syria. Do you still have same concerns, or are you satisfied with the Turkish government's statements that they were not the source of the leak? What do you make of the position of the Turkish government?
While we cannot confirm that we don't know who provided this information to the Anadolu agency, but it would be concerning if it came from a NATO ally. So, we have expressed our concerns. We're going to continue to operate, throughout northern Syria in the way that we have, and we do have force protection measures that allow us to continue to focus on fighting ISIS in northern Syria.
Wondering if you could speak to, before severing or this ongoing severing of ties with the Shuk, when's the last time that the coalition broke ties with a member of or a group under the umbrella of the vetted Syrian opposition? Has this happened before, and if so, when did it happen?
We have not had an incident like this where we have had to cut ties with a vetted Syrian opposition group. This is the first time. Thanks, everybody, and we'll see you next week.